Hey, I'm Dan.
And I'm Mike. I don't know if you know this or not, but when it comes to math, there are two very distinct categories. There are the math lovers and there are the math haters.
And no matter where you find yourself on that scale, we want to share something with you today that's a little bit about math and multiplication.
That's right, so let me explain. If I have something and I give it to you, then I no longer have it, right?
That's true.
Well, Jesus changes the math. Because when we have something and we give it to Jesus, then he multiplies it, and then he shares it with us and with others.
Wow, that is mind-blowing. Let's watch today's God story and find out a little bit more about that.
Did you know that a shark is the only known fish that can blink with both eyes? I know, amazing. Hi, I'm Alex, and maybe you're like me. In grade 10, I remember sitting in math class thinking, why are we learning this? I'm never gonna use this stuff. My math teacher had us solving for x and cracking cosine on our calculators and whatever it was that we were doing. And then 2 weeks ago, I'm helping my brother build a kitchen in his house, and we're building a cabinet. And to make this, we had to draw all kinds of diagrams that had brackets and exponents and division and multiplication and addition and subtraction all over it. And then we had these two corners and we had to drill a hole to get a pipe up in the middle. And to solve that, we had to find the middle point, and we did it. We drilled a circle and we got that pipe perfectly through the hole, all thanks to my grade 10 teacher. Thank you, Mr. E. You know, there's some things in life we just don't understand. They can be quite difficult to understand. And the math in our story today really seems like it just doesn't make any sense. You see, in today's story, Jesus takes 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and feeds thousands of people. It's brain busting, but Jesus does it. And that leads me into today's big idea. Jesus multiplies what we give him. When we read through the stories of Jesus, we see his love in everything, and we learn how our best efforts to love people can be made even bigger by Jesus. Our story today is in Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 44. The disciples had been teaching and doing just as Jesus asked them to. Remember, Jesus sent them out to preach and to share the good news to loads of people. And the disciples were super busy. There were so many people coming and going that they didn't even get a chance to eat, and they were exhausted. Then Jesus said to them, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." So they went off in a boat. And when they went off in the boat, there was all the crowds standing there, and they saw them go, and the crowds decided to run around the lake and get ahead of them, so that when Jesus and his disciples got to shore, the crowds were already there. And Jesus got there, he got out of the boat, and he felt a great deal of compassion for these people. He saw them as sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many, many things. By that time in the day, it was getting very late, and the people were getting hungry. And so the disciples looked to Jesus and said, "We should send the people away to go and get something to eat." Then Jesus told his disciples, "You give them something to eat." The disciples were surprised. They knew that there was no way that they could do that. They said it would take more than a half year's pay to feed all these people. So Jesus said, "Well, go and see what you have." And when they found out, they came back to him and said, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In fact, in the Gospel of John, the writer tells us that it was a young boy who offered up that food to Jesus and the disciples. But how far could 5 loaves and 2 fish really go? Well, Jesus was going to make sure that everyone had enough. He told everyone to sit down. They sat in groups of hundreds and 50s, and then Jesus took the bread and the fish, he looked up to heaven, and he gave thanks. And then he broke the loaves, and he handed them to his disciples to pass out to the people. He divided the fish and passed them around too. Let's read what the results were. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. Maybe you're wondering, how? How could 5,000 people be fed by 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread? The truth is, we get a great response when Jesus is teaching another time. Jesus teaches us that things that seem impossible to us are possible to God. And this is definitely one of those things. We may feel like we only have so much to give in certain situations. We may not feel like we have enough money or supplies or knowledge to help at all. But Jesus takes what we have and uses it in the most amazing ways. We all have something that we can give to serve Jesus and to help love God and love others in the very best way. And when we do, it can be amazing to see how Jesus multiplies what we give him. That's all I've got for now. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Wow, this is a pretty incredible story.
Yeah.
Just imagine you're there, Mike. You're one of the 5,000. And they start handing out the food, the one basket of food,
Okay.
and you're pretty hungry, but there's 5,000 people that still need to eat. What do you do in that situation?
I don't know. On one hand, I struggle with hunger, so I think it's probably better for everyone and for me if I get a good fill. At the same time, this little basket has to go to all these people. I'd probably just take a little piece and then pass it along, right?
But then you look down the line and people are getting a decent amount to eat and there's still food in the basket. That's crazy.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that would have been like, seeing that little basket just keep going. And I wonder what it was like for people if they'd see the food regenerating or they just see the same basket. It's crazy to think about, but it reminds us that literally anything is possible with Jesus.
Let's watch this story and see the way that God can help us when we partner with him in our own lives.
So first of all, I was a ADHD dyslexic boy. That was enough where now I'm the bullied kid. So walking to school was the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life, working on a sports car underneath a carport. And when I got close to him, I said, nice car, and he said, you like cars? And I said, I love cars. The week before I turned 15, coming home from school one day, his car's running, sitting at the curb. And he said, do you want to go for a ride? And I said, yes. And Billy took me for a ride, then pulled in an alleyway and showed off his car, and then took me up the back stairs to an apartment. And there was his junkie heroin addict partner, and so they made up a combination of methamphetamine and heroin and injected me. And so that was my introduction to drugs. I got out of there and I ran to the police station, which is only about 3 blocks away on Lundy's Lane. But on the way there, this is how victims think. This is my fault. Mom doesn't know about Billy because he's older. She would have said no. So instead of going to the police station where I was going to get in trouble because it's my fault, I stayed at a hostel on Bridge Street and was assaulted that night. My dad found me a few days later, and I went home and said I was sorry, but I'd lost my ability to say what was happening to me during those bullying years. I went to bed and then ran away. So by 19, I was probably designated by the Toronto Robbery Homicide as one of the most dangerous men in Canada. So they had a Canada-wide warrant on me. I was robbing everything that moved, and at 21, they finally got me. Armed robbery ×3, weapons ×4, assault, police escape, custody, and possession of narcotics under gangsterism. And then when I was in jail, I added a bunch more to it by escaping and doing different things. And so I was up to about 39 years. And then Supreme Court of Canada looked at it and knocked it down to 25. I was only in Collins Bay Prison for about 3 months doing an apprenticeship program in the lower garage. And a guard walked up to me and said, I want you to build a car for me. And I looked at him and swore at him. You can't work for guards. And he just kept talking. And at the end, he said, I'll give you a jar of coffee and a carton of American cigarettes every week that you work on my car. American cigarettes and coffee? Well, guess what I did for the next 25 years? First of all, the old Don Jail and Kingston Penitentiary, they are old school. So it was solitary confinement was called the Hole. And the reason it was called the Hole is because they took the toilet out because you could plug it, right? And then flood the whole thing and you could cause problems. That was where you went to washroom. Raised concrete platform, roll of toilet paper. You lay on the concrete and you put your toilet paper as a pillow. And once a day you get, the door has a 4-inch crack underneath it. and they slide in a cup with water and a slice of bean loaf. And I go into solitary confinement, and there's a Gideon's Bible, little red Gideon's Bible sitting next to a toilet paper roll. And I went in and I picked it up and I threw it at the guy's head and said, "Take this effing thing." And it hit him in the head. And the door is closing, and the guard smiles at me, and he goes, "Now do you want the Bible?" And I looked behind me, and he had taken my roll of toilet paper. So this is the only paper I'm getting for the next 20 days. And I would read the New Testament under the crack of the door. And so I loved reading the New Testament. I would read it every time I would go in solitary, and I would imagine the stories. In 1993, after 15 years in, I decided to take my own life. And in that room, my dad's voice came to me, like he was standing behind me. And he used to say this thing, "If it's all lost, ask God to. If it's all lost, let's go to treatment. If it's all lost, Rick, try one more time." And so, I'd never heard voices. I wouldn't have minded the company. I think it's a boring place, right? So I said, "Okay, God, let me be the guy on the cross next to you. Let me go to heaven on grace. Let me die like a man in the yard when it's my turn." I flushed my drugs down the toilet and went junk sick and gave my heart to God. So a professor comes in my life and challenges me. And he knew how to deal with dyslexia and how to teach me to do things 3 different ways so I can check my own work. 3 years later, I become the 17th person in Canadian history to get a university degree from inside a penitentiary. And so my dad got to watch me graduate at Queen's. And so I started saying, I need to come back and spend time with boys that are in damage to give them a chance. So I start building custom Harleys and hot rods. And that started Ozzy's Garage. So Ozzy's Garage comes under an umbrella, a charity umbrella, Truth for Teens. And so I quickly realized that the cool factor of a chopper or a muscle car would let me work with guys long enough to earn the right to ask what's going on in their life. But they also need to know that God exists. If I stood in front of my boys and said, "God, your Heavenly Father loves you," absolutely true statement, they would say, "What's a father?" And then the next thing would be, "What's love?" Before they'd ever come to, "Who's God?" A lot of these boys, if they don't meet somebody who's been damaged like them and then is healed, don't see themselves healing. They need to know a safe man. I need to be that safe man for them, and then slowly they start telling me what's going on. When I became a Christian, I could not see what God could see in me. It's a different thing than what we're taught, as to 1 and 1 makes 2. With God, 1 and 1 makes 150. It's all God's. He sends it out how he wants it.
Wow, what an incredible story. I love Rick's testimony and the way it shows God's love and grace and forgiveness that he has for all of us. Now, at such a low point in his life, he was able to offer his life to God, and how God has used that to impact so many people and show his unconditional love. It's amazing.
Yeah, and did you hear what Rick said about how 1 and 1 makes 150?
Yeah.
That's all God. It's so incredible.
And it's another example of the way Jesus' math is so much greater than the math that we can imagine. And so now let's get into our small groups and talk about what this looks like in our own lives.